So, there's a terrifying possibility lurking beneath the Pacific Ocean, something so massive, so utterly destructive, that if it were to happen, entire coastlines could be wiped off the map in a matter of hours. I'm talking about a mega tsunami, a colossal wall of water that could travel across the ocean at the speed of a jetliner, obliterating everything in its path. And here's the thing, scientists are starting to see signs that this isn't just some distant hypothetical scenario. No, the warning signs are already appearing, and the evidence is stacking up in a way that has experts seriously alarmed. There are whispers among oceanographers, murmurs in the geological community, quiet concerns that are growing louder with every new study. The Pacific, the largest and deepest ocean on Earth, is stirring in ways that suggest something catastrophic could be brewing beneath the waves. And if it is, there may be nothing anyone can do to stop it. To understand just how bad this could get, you have to grasp the sheer scale of what we're talking about. Normal tsunamis, like the ones most people are familiar with, are already devastating. The 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, for example, killed over 230,000 people across 14 countries, with waves reaching heights of up to 100 feet in some areas. That disaster was triggered by a massive undersea earthquake, one so powerful that it caused the entire planet to vibrate slightly. But that was a regular tsunami. A mega tsunami, on the other hand, is a completely different beast. This isn't just a huge wave. It's a towering, almost unfathomable wall of water, potentially hundreds of feet high, moving with enough force to flatten everything in its way. If one were to form in the Pacific, the destruction would be on a level that no modern city is prepared for. Entire metropolitan areas, Tokyo, Los Angeles, Sydney, San Francisco, could be hit with waves so high that even skyscrapers wouldn't be safe. Bridges would snap like twigs, buildings would be stripped down to their foundations, and anything caught in the water's path would be swept away like it never existed. But here's the real nightmare. Unlike regular tsunamis, which are typically caused by undersea earthquakes or volcanic eruptions, a mega tsunami often has a much more violent origin. The kind of event that creates one isn't just a shift in tectonic plates. It's something sudden, catastrophic, and completely overwhelming. A massive landslide, for example, can displace an unimaginable amount of water in mere seconds, creating a wave so enormous that it travels for thousands of miles before losing any of its power. And there are a few places in the Pacific where the conditions for this are lining up almost too perfectly. Scientists are particularly worried about an unstable section of the Hawaiian Islands, specifically on the Big Island, where enormous chunks of land have been slowly creeping toward the ocean for centuries. When a large enough piece finally gives way, it could trigger a landslide of biblical proportions, one that would send an absolutely enormous displacement of water hurtling outward in every direction. And if that happens, the results would be beyond catastrophic. But Hawaii isn't the only place that could set off a mega tsunami in the Pacific. There's also the infamous Cascadia subduction zone, a massive fault line stretching from northern California all the way up to British Columbia. This is one of the most dangerous seismic zones in the world, and it's long overdue for a massive earthquake. If the right conditions align, a powerful quake hitting just off the coast, in precisely the wrong way, it could trigger a collapse of the seafloor, instantly displacing billions of tons of water. The wave that would result could be monstrous, heading straight for the Pacific Northwest with almost no warning. Unlike an earthquake, which gives off clear seismic signals, a tsunami moves silently beneath the surface of the water, often traveling hundreds of miles before revealing itself. People in cities like Seattle, Portland, and Vancouver might not even realize what's coming until they see the horizon shift unnaturally, a towering wall of water rising up in the distance. And by then, it would already be too late. And then, of course, there's the wildcard scenario, one that almost no one likes to talk about because the implications are too terrifying to fully comprehend. The Pacific is home to a vast number of underwater volcanoes, many of which remain largely unmonitored. These undersea giants, known as seamounts, are essentially time bombs waiting to go off. And here's where things get particularly unnerving. Some of these volcanoes don't just erupt in the way you might expect. Instead of spewing lava like their land-based cousins, they can undergo catastrophic collapses, entire sections of the volcanic mountain breaking apart and crashing into the ocean all at once. This kind of event has been known to create waves over 1,000 feet high in past geological records. Now, imagine one of these hidden giants, sitting in the vast darkness of the Pacific, suddenly giving way. A single event like this could unleash a mega tsunami so powerful that even distant coastlines, places thousands of miles away, could be hit with waves large enough to rival the biggest disasters in history. And it's not just speculation. There's historical precedent for this kind of disaster, and the evidence is written all over the landscapes of certain regions. In Alaska, for example, there's the infamous Lituya Bay event of 1958, where a rockslide triggered what is still considered the tallest tsunami wave ever recorded, an almost incomprehensible 1,720 feet. That's taller than the Empire State Building. The wave completely stripped the surrounding land, ripping up millions of trees and leaving behind a barren scar that can still be seen today. Now, imagine something like that, but on a much larger scale, in the middle of the Pacific. The ripple effects would be felt across the entire planet. And this is where the real concern lies. Because we're not talking about just one isolated event. The Pacific is a complex, interconnected system, and the triggers for a mega tsunami are scattered all across its vast expanse. A major earthquake in one area could set off a chain reaction, destabilizing undersea slopes or awakening long-dormant volcanic structures. The threat isn't just in one place, it's everywhere. Scientists are starting to see warning signs, small but troubling shifts in seismic activity, temperature anomalies in the deep ocean, unexplained pressure changes along key fault lines. None of these on their own are enough to sound the alarm, but together, they paint a disturbing picture, one that suggests something big could be coming. And if it does? If the Pacific really is preparing to unleash a mega tsunami on an unprecedented scale, the world may have little time to prepare. Because when these events happen, they happen fast. There's no gradual buildup, no slow-motion disaster that gives people time to react. One moment, everything is normal. The next, an unimaginable wall of water is racing toward land at hundreds of miles per hour. The only question is, will we see it coming in time? But here's the part that's keeping experts up at night. The part that turns this from just another hypothetical disaster scenario into something that might actually be unfolding right now. Because deep beneath the Pacific, something is changing. The ocean floor, the very foundation of the Earth's largest and most powerful body of water, is behaving in ways that scientists can't fully explain. And while many of these changes might seem subtle on the surface, the implications are anything but. The Pacific isn't just shifting, it's cracking. Now let's break this down, because this isn't just some minor geological event. We're talking about a massive, widespread phenomenon, one that stretches across vast sections of the seafloor, involving forces so immense that they defy comprehension. Imagine the Earth's crust, that seemingly solid layer of rock beneath our feet, as a kind of skin, one that's constantly moving, stretching, and flexing. Most of the time, these movements are slow, almost imperceptible, happening over thousands or even millions of years. But every once in a while, something disturbs that balance. Something accelerates the process, turning what should be a gradual shift into a violent rupture. And right now, scientists are seeing signs that the Pacific seafloor is experiencing exactly that. Over the past few years, an increasing number of deep-sea sensors have picked up unusual activity, small but persistent tremors in areas that should be geologically stable, strange temperature fluctuations rising from cracks in the oceanic crust, and most disturbingly, unexplained shifts in the pressure readings of deep-sea fault lines. At first, these anomalies were dismissed as background noise, just the usual hum of a restless planet. But as more and more data came in, a pattern began to emerge. A pattern that suggests something is happening beneath the Pacific that we haven't seen before. And here's where things get truly unsettling. Because what some experts now believe is occurring is something known as a seafloor destabilization event, a process in which large sections of the oceanic crust begin to weaken, crack, and in some cases, even collapse. This isn't just an ordinary earthquake scenario. It's something much larger, something more unpredictable. Instead of a single violent rupture along a fault line, this kind of event involves widespread structural weakening of the seafloor itself, creating the perfect conditions for massive displacements of water. And when billions of tons of rock start shifting in ways they aren't supposed to, the results can be catastrophic. Imagine, for a moment, a vast section of the Pacific's undersea landscape, a region stretching for hundreds, maybe even thousands of miles, slowly becoming unstable. Picture enormous fissures snaking their way through the deep crust, splitting the ground open like cracks in a frozen lake. These aren't just hairline fractures. They're massive, deep gashes in the Earth's surface, some of them potentially extending for miles. And as these cracks grow, they begin to weaken the structural integrity of the entire area. The weight of the ocean pressing down above only adds to the instability, increasing the pressure on these fragile zones. And then, at some unpredictable moment, it happens. The weakened crust gives way, sending an enormous section of the seafloor plummeting downward in an instant. The consequences of such a collapse would be nothing short of apocalyptic. When a section of land that large suddenly drops, it forces a massive volume of water to surge outward, displacing billions of gallons in a split second. And unlike normal earthquake-triggered tsunamis, which involve a more linear movement of water, this kind of event would create a multi-directional shockwave, an enormous ripple effect sending towering waves outward in every direction. Within minutes, the ocean's surface would begin to churn violently, as the initial energy transfer forces the water to rise unnaturally. The first waves might be deceptively small at first, nothing more than a strange, pulsing swell. But then, as the displaced water rushes to fill the void left by the collapsing seafloor, a second, much larger wave would form, a true mega tsunami, rising to unfathomable heights. And the terrifying part? There would be almost no warning. Unlike earthquake-generated tsunamis, which are typically preceded by strong tremors that can serve as a natural alert system, a seafloor collapse could happen in near silence. The deep ocean absorbs much of the seismic energy from such an event, meaning that by the time surface-level sensors detect the disturbance, the waves would already be on their way. Coastal cities wouldn't have hours to prepare. They might have minutes, maybe less. This isn't just speculation. Scientists have found evidence of past seafloor collapses that suggest they've played a role in some of the largest tsunamis in Earth's history. Geological records show signs of sudden, massive underwater landslides in various parts of the Pacific, with sediment layers indicating that enormous sections of the ocean floor have broken apart in the distant past. Some researchers even believe that certain mystery tsunamis, ancient megawaves with no clear seismic trigger, may have been caused by exactly this kind of event. And if it's happened before, then the question isn't if it could happen again. It's when. And here's the most unsettling part. Some researchers now believe we may already be seeing the early warning signs of an impending collapse. In recent years, satellite data has revealed a series of unusual surface anomalies in the Pacific, unexplained swells and depressions in the ocean's surface that suggest large-scale movements happening far below. These anomalies are subtle, barely detectable to the naked eye, but they hint at something shifting beneath the water. Combine that with the growing number of unexplained deep-sea tremors and pressure fluctuations, and it starts to paint a very troubling picture. Because if a seafloor destabilization event is underway, there may be very little that can be done to stop it. The forces at play here are beyond human control, massive geological processes that have been set in motion over thousands, even millions of years. The only real question now is whether we're already past the point of no return. If a major section of the Pacific seafloor is on the verge of collapse, the world may be facing a disaster unlike anything in recorded history. The kind of catastrophe that reshapes coastlines, wipes out entire regions, and leaves behind a scar on the planet itself. If the seafloor collapse theory holds weight, then what's happening beneath the Pacific is not just a random geological event, it is the slow but inevitable result of forces that have been at work for thousands, if not millions, of years. The ocean floor is often imagined as a vast, immovable surface, but in reality, it is anything but stable. The seabed is in a constant state of flux, shaped by the immense pressures of shifting tectonic plates, deep sea currents, and even the gradual movements of the Earth's mantle far beneath. Over time, sections of the seafloor weaken under these relentless forces, creating areas of structural instability, hidden fault lines, massive pockets of pressurized gas, and regions where the crust itself begins to thin and crack. When these weak points give way, the collapse is sudden, violent, and capable of unleashing unimaginable destruction. And right now, there are signs that such a catastrophic event may be unfolding in the depths of the Pacific. One of the most alarming indicators comes from subtle, yet persistent, shifts detected along the vast network of undersea ridges and trenches that crisscross the ocean floor. These colossal formations stretch across thousands of miles, forming the very backbone of the Pacific's geological landscape. Normally, the slow and steady movements of these structures go unnoticed, hidden beneath miles of water and layers of sediment. But in recent years, geologists have detected anomalies, unusual deformations in certain regions of the seabed. These changes are not the kind associated with typical tectonic activity, such as faults, slipping, or subduction. Instead, they suggest something far more ominous. The very foundation of the ocean floor is weakening, sagging under its own weight. In some locations, the seabed appears to be sinking in irregular patterns, as if sections of the Earth's crust are stretching beyond their limits. This could be the early warning sign of a catastrophic collapse, one that, when it happens, could send shockwaves through the entire Pacific basin. A key factor in this growing instability may lie in the hidden fractures that run deep beneath the ocean floor. These fractures, largely undetected until recently, may be acting as conduits for seawater, allowing it to seep into the layers of rock beneath the crust. While this process may seem insignificant at first glance, the long-term consequences could be disastrous. Over time, as water infiltrates these cracks, it can weaken the structural integrity of the rock itself, causing it to erode from within. This slow but relentless process can create massive voids beneath the seabed, vast pockets of empty space where once solid rock has crumbled away. At first, these cavities remain hidden, concealed beneath the thick layers of sediment that cover the ocean floor. But as the weight of the overlying crust presses down, these weakened sections may reach a tipping point. And when they finally give way, the result is not a minor geological shift, but a full-scale collapse, an event capable of triggering a tsunami powerful enough to devastate entire coastlines. But that's not the only danger lurking beneath the surface. Scientists have long been aware of the presence of enormous methane deposits trapped within the seabed. These deposits, known as methane hydrates, are essentially frozen reserves of highly pressurized gas, locked within the sediment layers of the ocean floor. Under normal conditions, these hydrates remain stable due to the immense pressure of the water above them and the frigid temperatures of the deep sea. However, if the seabed begins to weaken, if cracks form, if sections collapse, if seismic stress builds up, the delicate balance that keeps these deposits contained could be disrupted. And if that happens, the consequences could be catastrophic. A sudden release of methane gas from the seabed could trigger what geologists refer to as a submarine landslide avalanche. Picture an entire section of the ocean floor, a region the size of a small country, suddenly destabilizing, sending millions of tons of rock and sediment plunging downward in an instant. The sheer volume of displaced material would be enough to displace an enormous amount of water, generating a tsunami unlike anything seen in modern history. Unlike a traditional earthquake-triggered tsunami, which typically involves the shifting of a fault line, a seafloor collapse would release an almost unimaginable force, one capable of creating waves far larger than any previous models have predicted. And because these collapses can occur in multiple stages, one section falling away, triggering another and another, the resulting tsunami could grow in intensity as it travels across the ocean, gaining momentum rather than dissipating. There is historical precedent for this type of event. More than 8,000 years ago, the Storegga Slide, a massive undersea landslide off the coast of Norway, sent a tsunami racing across the North Atlantic, inundating vast areas of what is now the United Kingdom and Northern Europe. That single collapse moved an estimated 3,000 cubic kilometers of sediment, an amount so vast that it permanently reshaped the seabed. If something similar were to happen in the Pacific, the results could be even more catastrophic. The Pacific Ocean is home to some of the largest and deepest undersea formations on Earth. A collapse in one of these regions wouldn't just generate a local disaster, it would send a tsunami barreling across thousands of miles, reaching coastlines on multiple continents. Cities in Japan, the west coast of the United States, Southeast Asia, and even parts of Australia and South America could be hit with waves towering dozens of feet high, traveling at speeds of up to 500 miles per hour. Entire communities could be wiped out in minutes. And the most chilling part? If this process has already begun, the collapse itself could be inevitable. Unlike earthquakes, which are the result of sudden fault shifts, a seafloor collapse is a gradual, hidden process, one that builds over time, as pressure mounts and structural weaknesses deepen. There may be no clear warning, no definitive sign that an event is imminent. The first indication that something is wrong could come only when it is too late, when the ocean floor suddenly gives way, setting off a chain reaction of destruction that no one can stop. As we continue to investigate the root causes of the seismic activity currently shaking the Pacific, another explanation that has gained significant attention among scientists involves the increasingly erratic movements of the tectonic plates themselves. Unlike traditional patterns of plate movement, which have followed a relatively predictable course for millions of years, recent data suggests that something has disrupted the delicate balance between these massive land masses. The Pacific Plate, which is one of the largest and most influential of the Earth's tectonic plates, is experiencing more stress than it ever has before. This shift in behavior may not only explain the current seismic activity but also point to deeper, more troubling trends unfolding beneath our feet. The Pacific Plate, situated between Asia, the Americas, and the Antarctic, is constantly in motion, driven by forces deep within the Earth's mantle. The plate's movements are typically slow, just a few centimeters per year, but over the course of millions of years, these slow shifts have caused the land masses to rearrange and shape the surface of our planet. Normally, these movements happen without much fanfare, with small quakes and tremors serving as a reminder of the Earth's restless nature. However, in recent decades, there have been signs that the pace and intensity of plate movement in the Pacific region is changing. This sudden acceleration of tectonic activity has led some researchers to propose a theory that the Pacific Plate is shifting in ways that are more unpredictable and violent than ever before. One critical factor behind this change could be the gradual heating of the Earth's mantle. Beneath the Earth's crust, the mantle is in a constant state of flux. Massive plumes of superheated material rise from the planet's core, creating pressure against the plates above. When these plumes encounter specific regions of the Earth's crust, they can cause localized hotspots of intense heat. These hotspots can melt the surrounding rock, making it more pliable and causing tectonic plates to shift more dramatically. This heating process, combined with the unpredictable movement of the plates themselves, could be what's driving the increased instability in the Pacific region. As the Pacific Plate encounters these pockets of intense heat, it may become more prone to sudden, unpredictable shifts, amplifying the risk of large-scale earthquakes and volcanic activity. Moreover, the Pacific Plate's interactions with its neighboring plates, specifically the North American Plate and the Australian Plate, are becoming increasingly complex. These interactions occur primarily along fault lines, where the edges of the plates grind against each other. Under normal circumstances, these faults operate in a relatively steady manner, allowing the plates to slide past each other without major disruptions. However, the heightened stress in the region appears to have altered the behavior of these fault lines. Instead of slipping gradually and evenly, some sections are becoming locked in place, building up significant amounts of pressure. As the tension continues to accumulate, the potential for sudden, catastrophic ruptures increases exponentially. The resulting earthquakes, if they occur, could be far more powerful and far-reaching than anyone anticipates. Furthermore, the Pacific Ocean basin itself is thought to be undergoing a process called plate compression. Plate compression occurs when two tectonic plates push against each other with such force that the crust between them is squeezed and folded. This squeezing of the plates can lead to the formation of new fault lines, as well as the deepening of existing ones. What's particularly alarming about plate compression is that it can create a domino effect. One area of intense pressure can quickly trigger the collapse of surrounding regions, resulting in a chain reaction of seismic activity that spreads out across vast areas of the ocean floor. In the Pacific, where the tectonic plates meet at various points, the cumulative effect of this compression could be far-reaching, putting entire regions at risk of being hit by powerful earthquakes and tsunamis in the near future. Even more troubling is the way these changes in the movement of the Pacific plate are affecting the surrounding areas. As the plate accelerates and shifts erratically, it has begun to create a kind of domino effect in the nearby regions. The increased strain on the Pacific plate is starting to create new zones of instability on the surrounding plates, which in turn is heightening the overall level of seismic risk throughout the Pacific Rim. The Ring of Fire, an area known for its high levels of volcanic and seismic activity, has long been a hotbed of tectonic action. But now, the instability that has gripped the Pacific plate seems to be spreading outward, destabilizing neighboring plates and fault lines at an alarming rate. This expanded zone of heightened activity is causing tremors to ripple outward in all directions, from Japan to the west coast of the Americas, creating a kind of interconnected web of seismic risk. One of the most concerning aspects of this increasing tectonic instability is its potential to disrupt existing fault lines in unexpected ways. For instance, the San Andreas Fault in California has long been a point of concern for scientists, due to its location near heavily populated areas. While this fault has remained relatively inactive for decades, the shifting of the Pacific plate could trigger a rupture along the San Andreas, potentially unleashing a catastrophic earthquake. Similarly, the fault lines along the Aleutian Islands, which run parallel to the Pacific plate, are showing signs of heightened activity. These areas, once considered relatively stable, are now being viewed as potential hotspots for future seismic events. The evidence that the Pacific plate is in a state of flux doesn't just come from theoretical models, it's backed by hard data. Seismographs have recorded an uptick in tremors and minor earthquakes in previously quiet regions, while GPS measurements of plate motion show abnormal acceleration in certain sectors. These signs point to a dramatic shift in the way the plates are behaving, and suggest that the seismic risks in the Pacific region may be more severe than previously anticipated. As the Pacific plate continues to shift, the region will undoubtedly face even greater challenges in predicting and responding to future seismic events. But one thing is certain, the status quo has changed. The Pacific is no longer the relatively stable zone it once was. Its tectonic behavior is evolving, and we are left to wonder just how far-reaching the consequences of these changes will be. Now, let's take a closer look at an often overlooked but incredibly important factor that could be contributing to the seismic chaos we're witnessing beneath the ocean: underwater volcanoes. When most people think of volcanoes, they picture those dramatic eruptions on land, sending clouds of ash into the sky and lava spilling down mountainsides. But what about the volcanoes that lie beneath the ocean's surface, hidden from view but powerful in their own right? These underwater volcanoes may not produce the same dramatic visuals as their land-based counterparts, but they have the potential to stir up seismic activity that ripples across the ocean floor, causing tremors that we feel far from their eruption points. Underwater volcanoes are typically located along the boundaries of tectonic plates, the massive pieces of Earth's crust that float on top of the molten mantle. These plates are constantly shifting, sometimes moving apart, sometimes colliding with one another. When the plates move apart, magma from deep within the Earth rises to fill the gap, creating volcanic vents that form these hidden giants on the ocean floor. It's here, in the deep and seemingly calm waters, that these volcanoes are at work, sometimes quietly, sometimes with a much more dramatic flair. Even when these volcanoes aren't erupting in a spectacular fashion, they still contribute to the seismic activity we're feeling. Small shifts, subtle changes in pressure, and gradual eruptions can all cause seismic waves to travel through the Earth's crust, leading to tremors on the surface far from where the volcanic activity actually occurs. But here's the thing, these underwater volcanoes often don't get the attention they deserve. They don't spew ash or lava columns that rise into the sky for all to see. Instead, they tend to operate beneath the radar, slowly releasing energy in the form of heat, gas, and molten rock. The process is much more gradual, but the energy released can still have a huge impact on the surrounding environment, especially when you consider the sheer scale of these volcanic systems. The Pacific Ocean, in particular, is home to a vast network of underwater volcanoes, many of which are located within the so-called Ring of Fire, a region infamous for its tectonic activity. It's in this area that the majority of the Earth's seismic and volcanic activity occurs, including the eruptions of both land and underwater volcanoes. The Pacific is a hotbed of seismic unrest, and the presence of these volcanoes only amplifies the region's potential for seismic activity. You see, what makes these underwater volcanoes so fascinating and concerning is that they don't always erupt with huge explosions. Instead, much of their activity happens beneath the surface, building up pressure slowly over time. This slow accumulation of pressure can result in seemingly minor shifts in the Earth's crust. When magma rises to the surface but doesn't erupt explosively, it can create fissures in the ocean floor, causing small earthquakes. These minor tremors might seem insignificant at first, but they can lead to a chain reaction, as the energy from one small shift is transferred to nearby fault lines, triggering even more seismic activity. Over time, these small disturbances can add up, leading to a series of tremors that might travel great distances, causing shaking far from the actual volcanic site. And it's not just about the pressure of the magma itself. There's also the issue of the surrounding environment, the rocks, the crust, the ocean water, all of which are affected by the volcano's presence. When magma rises from the Earth's interior, it has to push its way through layers of solid rock, and in doing so, it can fracture the ocean floor. These fractures create faults, which in turn lead to shifts in the Earth's crust. The movement of magma through these rocks can also create underground chambers of gas and steam, further pressurizing the surrounding area. This internal pressure, if not released gradually, can cause sudden, intense bursts of activity that send seismic waves rippling across the ocean. And because the majority of these volcanoes are located in deep water, it's much harder to detect these minor shifts until they've already triggered a larger tremor or earthquake. Now let's dig a little deeper into the way these underwater volcanoes interact with the ocean itself. As the volcanoes release heat and gases, they don't just affect the crust, they also change the dynamics of the water around them. This release of heat into the ocean can cause shifts in the local water temperature, and the energy released can trigger movement in the ocean floor that might not be immediately obvious on the surface. Even without a major eruption, these shifts can disrupt the surrounding ocean environment, causing further instability in the crust. This instability creates a kind of feedback loop. As the ocean floor shifts, the stress on surrounding areas builds up, increasing the likelihood of more seismic events in the future. It's like a never-ending cycle, each small eruption or pressure release pushing the crust further toward a breaking point. Another interesting factor is the relationship between underwater volcanoes and hydrothermal vents. These vents occur when water from the ocean seeps into the Earth's crust and is heated by the magma below. The superheated water then rises back to the surface, carrying with it dissolved minerals and gases. These vents are a crucial part of the ocean's ecosystem, but they also play a role in the stability of the crust. The release of this hot water can contribute to shifts in the ocean floor. As the mineral-rich water escapes through the vents, it can weaken surrounding rock, making the crust more susceptible to shifting. It's a subtle process, but over time, these small changes can have a significant impact on the overall stability of the region. And as the pressure builds, we see more and more tremors occurring in areas far from the vent itself. In addition to these direct effects, underwater volcanoes can also contribute to the formation of underwater mountain ranges. As the magma cools and solidifies on the ocean floor, it builds up over time, creating massive underwater mountains and ridges. These formations can be vast, stretching for thousands of miles beneath the ocean's surface. The sheer size and scale of these underwater ranges can have a profound impact on the surrounding ocean floor. As the plates beneath the Earth's surface continue to shift, these massive geological features can shift along with them, causing further seismic disturbances. It's like a constant reshaping of the ocean floor, with each change contributing to the overall seismic activity in the region. So, while we may not always see the dramatic eruptions of underwater volcanoes, they're always at work beneath the ocean's surface. They're not just causing eruptions, they're subtly changing the environment in ways that can trigger tremors, disrupt the ocean floor, and create a seismic ripple effect that spreads far beyond their immediate location. It's a hidden force, working quietly but powerfully, reshaping the ocean floor one eruption at a time, and in doing so, it's adding to the growing number of tremors we're witnessing today. The ocean floor is alive with activity, and these underwater volcanoes are one of the key drivers behind it all. Let's take a deeper dive into this idea and really understand how underwater volcanoes could be playing a role in all this seismic activity we've been discussing. So, picture this: the ocean floor isn't just a flat, calm surface beneath the waves. It's a dynamic, shifting environment where the Earth is constantly at work. When magma from deep within the Earth rises to the surface, it doesn't just create a volcano. It's creating massive changes beneath the ocean, changing the very structure of the seafloor. Now, we're not talking about a single isolated volcano in some quiet part of the world. No, we're talking about huge underwater volcanic systems that run across the globe. These are massive ridges and cracks where tectonic plates meet, and they're constantly releasing magma. Imagine these places like gigantic pressure cookers, where hot molten rock is pushing up from the Earth's mantle, slowly but surely. As the magma rises, it pushes apart the plates, and that constant pressure leads to cracks in the ocean floor, fractures that can lead to the kind of seismic activity that we're seeing now. But it doesn't stop there. The rising magma doesn't just form new land beneath the sea, it also has a huge effect on the surrounding tectonic plates. Every time magma rises up, it forces the plates to move in subtle ways. Sometimes it's a tiny shift, but other times, it's a much bigger one. And when plates move, they release energy. That's what causes earthquakes. And these aren't just small tremors either. If the energy released is significant enough, it could trigger some pretty serious seismic waves that travel across the ocean floor and, in some cases, make their way to the surface, causing disruption for both the underwater ecosystem and the coastlines above. The underwater volcanoes themselves don't just create these shifts in a smooth, gradual way, though. Sometimes pressure builds up underneath the ocean floor over a long period of time. This pressure builds and builds until it's just too much to contain, causing the surrounding rock to crack and shift dramatically. When this happens, it can trigger what's known as a rift earthquake, a shake that reverberates through the ocean like a stone dropped into water, rippling across the surface. And sometimes, when the magma is especially restless, these rift earthquakes can escalate into something far more powerful. Now, think about the sheer scale of this. We're not just dealing with small fractures here. We're talking about potentially huge, unstable pockets of magma that build up beneath the ocean over long periods. As they accumulate, these pockets create an immense amount of pressure beneath the ocean floor. And over time, this pressure has to be released. Imagine it like a balloon that you keep blowing air into. Eventually, it's going to pop. That's how volcanic activity works beneath the ocean. As the molten rock rises, it's like a giant pressure release valve. But when that pressure is released too quickly, the consequences can be massive, and the seismic activity that follows can be felt far beyond the immediate area. And here's where things get even more interesting. We've been talking about magma rising to the surface, creating cracks and shifting plates, but there's also the issue of the ocean itself. The weight and movement of water can impact the stability of these underwater volcanoes. Ocean currents, for example, are powerful forces. They don't just sit still. They flow and move across the sea, eroding parts of the ocean floor. This erosion can weaken the rock around these volcanic systems, making it easier for magma to push its way through, creating even more instability in the surrounding rock. So, not only is magma at work, but the very water above it is constantly interacting with the ocean floor, making things even more unpredictable. What's really concerning here is how subtle these underwater volcanic systems can be. Unlike land-based volcanoes that have visible eruptions or ash clouds, these underwater systems are often silent and hidden. We don't always see the buildup of magma, the shifts in the plates, or the cracks forming in real time. That means that when an eruption or a major seismic event does happen, it can feel sudden and unexpected, even though the forces behind it have been building up for quite some time. It's a quiet force, working far beneath the ocean, but its effects can be felt across vast distances, from the deepest parts of the sea to the farthest shorelines. And we haven't even begun to talk about the environmental impact of all this. When underwater volcanoes erupt, they don't just spew molten rock, they also release gases into the water. Gases like sulfur dioxide, carbon dioxide, and other chemicals are constantly being emitted from these volcanic systems. Over time, this can change the chemical makeup of the water around them. Imagine what that could do to marine life. Small shifts in temperature, oxygen levels, and acidity could cause entire ecosystems to adapt, or even collapse. Fish and marine mammals could find their habitats disrupted, coral reefs could suffer, and some species might be driven out entirely. This chain of events doesn't just stop at the ocean floor, it ripples out, affecting life above and below the waves, and sometimes contributing to the seismic energy that eventually reaches the surface. So when we talk about underwater volcanoes and their contribution to seismic activity, it's not just about the magma. It's the entire system, the rising magma, the shifting plates, the currents, the gases, all of it coming together, creating a delicate balance that, when disturbed, can send shockwaves across the ocean and land. Understanding this connection is key to understanding why we're seeing such dramatic seismic events. It's all part of a larger, interconnected system that's constantly in motion, even if we can't always see it happening. And the more we dig into this, the more we realize how these underwater volcanoes are shaping the world beneath the waves, and the world above them, too. Now let's step into the shoes of those who might be facing the impact of a massive tsunami. We've already discussed how these waves can come from nowhere, with the sudden force of nature sweeping across the ocean at unimaginable speeds. But what's one of the most immediate effects of a giant tsunami that might surprise you? Well, it's the devastation it causes to coastal infrastructure, and not just in the way you might think. Picture this: you're standing on the shore, looking out over what seems like a peaceful, calm ocean. Everything's normal, until you notice the water beginning to recede, pulling back from the coastline in what seems like an unnatural movement. What you're witnessing is the early warning sign of a tsunami. The water isn't just retreating, it's preparing to bring an overwhelming force with it, a giant wall of water that will surge forward with incredible power. Now, we all know that tsunamis are massive, but what's truly alarming is how their impact goes far beyond the initial wave. Sure, it's easy to imagine buildings being swept away, or the destruction caused by the crushing force of a wave. But the effect on infrastructure is far more insidious and widespread than you might expect. Let's talk about something that a lot of people don't always think about: the long-term damage to the structural integrity of coastal buildings, roads, and bridges. It's not just about the immediate flooding or the destruction you see in the first few moments. A tsunami can wreak havoc on the very foundations of our coastal cities. Buildings that might look intact after the wave passes could actually be weakened, sometimes fatally, by the underlying erosion caused by the water. Think about it: a tsunami isn't just a single wave crashing in and out. It's a series of waves, with each one coming in, rushing over the land, and then retreating back into the sea. This repeated motion causes massive erosion at the base of buildings and structures, often without us even realizing it in the immediate aftermath. Take a bridge, for example. You might assume that it could withstand the wave. But what happens when the wave surges in and pushes against the base of the supports? The force of the water can erode the foundations of that bridge, especially if it's a structure that's built near the shoreline. The bridge may not collapse immediately, but the erosion over time could make it unstable, making it more susceptible to future damage. It's a ticking time bomb that could eventually lead to a bridge collapse, even after the tsunami waves have receded. And it doesn't just stop with bridges. We're talking about roads, highways, and essential transportation routes. After a tsunami, roads can be heavily undermined by the retreating water, leaving large sinkholes or cracks in their wake. Even seemingly stable roads can become dangerous, with layers of the surface washed away or the earth beneath it eroded to the point of no return. So, even though it might look like the worst is over, the infrastructure that remains could be entirely unusable, leaving communities cut off from vital supplies, emergency services, or even escape routes. Let's not forget the harbors and docks either. They're typically one of the first places hit by the waves, and as such, they face a brutal impact. The force of the water can tear apart piers, flood storage facilities, and damage ships docked at port. But the true devastation comes after the wave has passed. Harbors and docks that rely on large, heavy equipment to manage cargo or ships are suddenly rendered useless, with millions of dollars of damage done to both public and private property. And even after repairs are made, the harbor may take years to fully restore, if it can be restored at all. The economy of the region, especially one that relies on shipping and trade, could be crushed under the weight of this destruction. But perhaps the most alarming part of this structural devastation is how it disrupts the entire fabric of coastal life. Once the buildings and infrastructure are affected, entire communities are thrown into disarray. The economic stability of the area is shattered, schools and hospitals may be forced to close, and emergency services are left scrambling to pick up the pieces. The immediate devastation that comes with the floodwaters is only the beginning. It's the long-term collapse of the systems that were once the foundation of coastal life that causes the real, sustained damage. People are left without the means to travel, to communicate, to function in the way they once did. And in the aftermath of such destruction, the ability to rebuild becomes a monumental task, one that can take years, if not decades. The impact on the infrastructure goes much deeper than just the physical damage, too. When these systems fail, it forces communities to adapt in ways they never imagined. People might be forced to relocate, businesses might close their doors for good, and the economic landscape of the area could be changed forever. Even the emotional toll is immeasurable. People lose not just their homes and businesses, but their sense of normalcy, their ability to live in the places they once knew so well. When we look at a giant tsunami and its effect on coastal infrastructure, it's easy to imagine the immediate destruction, the floodwaters rising, the waves crashing, the chaos. But the real story lies in what comes after, in the aftermath. In the erosion of our foundation, both literally and figuratively. It's about the slow unraveling of the systems that hold our communities together. It's about rebuilding, but also about facing the realization that some of these communities might never return to the way they were. Now, let's switch gears and look at another massive effect a tsunami could have, one that doesn't always get the spotlight it deserves. We've talked about the damage to infrastructure, but there's something else equally destructive that could unfold: the catastrophic loss of life. It's not just about the wave itself, or the initial flooding, it's about how quickly it takes away any chance for survival, leaving devastation in its wake. Imagine this: the tsunami has already surged in, and the destruction is all around. But the most tragic consequence isn't just the visible damage, it's the lives that are lost in mere seconds. People who thought they had enough time to escape, or those who were caught off guard by the wave's speed simply didn't stand a chance. In fact, the most horrifying part of a tsunami is how unpredictable it is. It can hit in the middle of the night, or during the busiest part of the day when people are going about their normal lives. In moments like that, it doesn't matter who you are, where you are, or how prepared you think you are, the water doesn't care. Tsunamis don't give people much time to react. When a wave that could be hundreds of feet tall strikes, it's not like a flood where the water rises gradually and gives you a chance to get to higher ground. No, a tsunami is fast. It's brutal. It crashes over everything in its path, sweeping away cars, buildings, trees, and anything else it encounters. When this kind of force hits, survival becomes a matter of seconds, seconds that many people don't have. The speed of a tsunami is shocking. It doesn't wait around. At its fastest, a tsunami can travel as quickly as 500 miles per hour, faster than the speed of a commercial airliner. And because of that, people who live near the coast, especially in low-lying areas, don't have much of a chance to evacuate. For those who are near the epicenter of the event, the tsunami often strikes within minutes, with little or no warning. The waves crash with such force that they can obliterate entire villages, towns, and cities within moments. No amount of preparation can protect against a wave this strong and fast. But it's not just the wave itself that's deadly. The aftermath also creates a significant loss of life. After the initial wave comes and goes, there's a period of immense danger. Water contamination, disease, and injuries from debris cause a ripple effect. People who survive the tsunami might find themselves injured, stranded, or without access to clean water or food. Hospitals and emergency services are overwhelmed, and with transportation routes destroyed, help takes longer to reach the people who need it most. The longer it takes for aid to arrive, the more likely people are to suffer and even die from preventable causes, like infections or malnutrition. The loss of life doesn't end with the first wave, it stretches out, affecting people for days, weeks, and even months afterward. Let's take a moment to think about the emotional toll of this destruction as well. It's not just the physical bodies that are lost, but the psychological scars it leaves behind. Entire families are wiped out, leaving behind grieving survivors who are left to cope with the horror of what they've witnessed. Entire communities can be destroyed, and with that destruction comes a deep sense of loss. The trauma doesn't just disappear, it lingers, often affecting future generations. Survivors may deal with post-traumatic stress, depression, and anxiety as they try to rebuild their lives in the wake of such a tragedy. The emotional toll on those who lose loved ones is just as devastating as the physical loss of life. And for those who survive, it may take years to come to terms with what they've lost, and even longer to rebuild a sense of normalcy in their shattered world. What makes the loss of life during a tsunami even more tragic is that many of these deaths could have been prevented with better planning, better warning systems, or more effective evacuation protocols. But in many cases, these events happen so quickly, with so little warning, that the people affected don't have a fighting chance. The lack of preparedness in certain regions makes the tsunami even more deadly. Coastal areas with poor infrastructure, lack of warning systems, or inadequate evacuation plans are often the hardest hit, suffering devastating casualties because the systems in place weren't enough to protect the people. As the wave surges in and out, it doesn't just take away homes or possessions, it takes away lives. The scale of the loss is almost incomprehensible. And once the immediate aftermath has passed, the emotional and physical toll of the event lingers, reminding the survivors of the fragility of life. It's a tragic, harsh reality that continues long after the waves have receded, and one that haunts the survivors and their families for years to come. Now that we've discussed the devastating effects a tsunami can have, it's time to shift gears and talk about what we can do to detect these catastrophic waves before they strike and, ultimately, how we can work toward mitigating their impact. While it might feel like there's no way to stop a force of nature like a tsunami, the truth is, with modern technology and an increased focus on preparation, we've made significant strides in tsunami detection and prevention. Though there's still much to be done, the potential for saving lives and reducing the destruction is something we should all be focused on. First and foremost, let's look at early warning systems, arguably one of the most critical tools in the fight against tsunamis. The good news is, we've come a long way in developing these systems, and they've saved countless lives. How does it work? Well, the key is detecting the initial signs of an undersea earthquake, which is often the primary cause of a tsunami. When an earthquake occurs beneath the ocean, it can displace large amounts of water, creating the waves we fear. Sensors are placed deep beneath the ocean's surface to detect seismic activity. The moment these sensors pick up on an earthquake, they send data back to monitoring stations, which can determine if the earthquake is likely to trigger a tsunami. If it's determined that the quake is big enough and in the right location, the system can send out alerts to coastal areas, giving people a critical window of time to evacuate. The power of early warning systems lies in their ability to act fast. But these systems don't just rely on one method to detect a tsunami. They use multiple technologies working in tandem. One such method is through the use of tsunami buoys. These floating devices are scattered across the world's oceans, constantly monitoring the water's surface for unusual changes in pressure. If there's a significant shift in water levels, these buoys can detect it and transmit the information to the authorities. By combining seismic data with buoy data, scientists can get a much clearer picture of whether a tsunami is forming and how large it might be, helping them predict the tsunami's arrival with greater accuracy. This is crucial because the quicker we know, the more time people have to get to higher ground and avoid the incoming disaster. While early warning systems are a key piece of the puzzle, we also need to focus on improving communication methods once the warning has been issued. The challenge here isn't just detecting the tsunami but ensuring that the information reaches the people who need it the most. In many regions, especially in remote or developing areas, access to modern communication technology can be limited, which poses a significant challenge. We need to make sure that coastal populations, whether they live in high-rise apartments, small villages, or fishing communities, are equipped with the tools to receive tsunami warnings. That could mean everything from using emergency sirens to text alerts, radio broadcasts, or even satellite-based communication systems that can reach people in areas where cellular networks are down. The goal is to make sure that no one is left in the dark, especially when seconds matter. Another crucial piece of tsunami prevention is infrastructure. It's not just about detecting the waves before they strike but also about building coastal defenses that can withstand their power. Imagine this: along coastal areas prone to tsunamis, we could develop sea walls, levees, or barriers that are specifically designed to absorb the force of a wave. In some regions, these defenses already exist and have proven to be effective in reducing the damage caused by smaller tsunamis. However, when you're facing waves that could reach hundreds of feet, we need to think bigger, more innovative. Engineering solutions like offshore barriers, huge structures that could be placed in the ocean to dampen the wave's force before it reaches land, could be an effective option in some regions. This would require massive investments and extensive planning, but the potential to save lives and property makes it a worthwhile endeavor. Additionally, there's a focus on local-level education and preparedness. Early warning systems are only effective if the people who receive the warnings know what to do with that information. This is where local training programs and community outreach play a huge role. In places like Japan, which has a long history of tsunami risk, residents are regularly educated on how to react when the sirens go off. Evacuation drills, education campaigns, and preparedness plans need to become a regular part of coastal life. People need to know the fastest routes to higher ground, the importance of not waiting for a second wave, and how to stay informed during the evacuation. By making sure people are prepared, even the most vulnerable communities can reduce the loss of life. On a larger scale, international collaboration also plays an essential role in tsunami prevention. Tsunamis don't respect borders, and neither should our efforts to stop them. Countries around the Pacific Rim, in particular, must work together to share data, coordinate tsunami warnings, and establish joint preparedness plans. A tsunami triggered by an earthquake in one country could have devastating consequences for another, and it's critical that neighboring countries have a unified response strategy. This kind of collaboration, through organizations like the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, enables nations to pool resources, share research, and create more robust systems for detecting and responding to tsunamis, regardless of where they originate. A cooperative approach ensures that the global community is prepared to deal with tsunamis as a collective effort. Tsunami research is another critical component of our ability to prevent destruction. The more scientists understand about how tsunamis form and travel, the better we can anticipate them. Today, researchers are using advanced modeling techniques to simulate how waves behave in different ocean conditions. By understanding the interaction between the earthquake's epicenter, the water's depth, and the coastline's shape, scientists can refine their predictions about tsunami behavior. These models are constantly improving, and as they become more accurate, they allow us to predict the path and strength of tsunamis with greater precision. The better the models, the better we can prepare, which is crucial in areas where tsunamis are common but early warning systems are still developing. By improving detection technologies, strengthening infrastructure, and educating communities, we can significantly reduce the impact of tsunamis and save countless lives. But this is an ongoing effort that requires constant attention, research, and cooperation. What we've accomplished so far is impressive, but as climate change and human activities continue to affect the planet's ecosystems, we must remain vigilant and continue refining our approaches to preventing and mitigating the effects of tsunamis. As we come to the end of our deep dive into the potential for catastrophic tsunamis and the measures we can take to detect and prevent them, it's clear that while these natural disasters may seem overwhelmingly destructive, we are not powerless in the face of such immense forces of nature. From the seismic sensors placed beneath the ocean's surface to the tsunami buoys monitoring the waters, the strides we've made in detecting these waves in real time have been monumental. These technologies, when paired with rapid communication systems, offer us the critical window of time needed to evacuate and save lives. But that's just the beginning. We've also explored the growing importance of infrastructure, strong, resilient coastal defenses, and the need for innovative solutions like offshore barriers that could absorb or deflect the worst of the waves. Alongside that, local education, training, and preparation are essential. Every community, from the most densely populated cities to the smallest villages, must know how to act in the event of a tsunami. Time, after all, is often our most valuable resource, and the more prepared we are, the better our chances of survival. Governments and organizations must work together, not just within their own borders but across continents, because tsunamis don't respect national boundaries. It's a global issue that requires a global response. As we move forward, the lessons we've learned in tsunami prediction and preparedness will continue to evolve. Advances in research, like improved modeling techniques and international collaboration, will only enhance our understanding and ability to predict these waves with greater accuracy. And with climate change and other human activities altering the planet's natural rhythms, these innovations will be more crucial than ever. The need for global awareness, proactive planning, and investment in technological solutions is clear. We must continue to work tirelessly to stay ahead of the next disaster, investing in better tools, stronger defenses, and more comprehensive education for communities at risk. But it's not just about technology and infrastructure, it's about our shared commitment to one another. When a disaster of this magnitude strikes, it's not just the actions of governments and scientists that make a difference, but the strength and resilience of communities. When we stand together, prepared and educated, the chances of surviving a tsunami rise dramatically. It's the shared effort of individuals, communities, scientists, and world leaders that can turn the tide in our favor. In closing, while the threat of tsunamis remains a very real part of our world, we have the power to minimize their impact. Through innovation, collaboration, and preparation, we can face this challenge head-on. But this ongoing battle requires our collective will to stay informed, stay ready, and never stop improving the systems that protect us. Together, we can help ensure that when the next wave comes, we're ready. If you found this video informative and eye-opening, be sure to hit the like button to show your support. Don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the world's most fascinating and pressing topics. Stay prepared, stay informed, and thank you for watching.